Okay, now let's see another scenario how you can pass down some properties. Let's say remove all this. Okay. And let's say, for example, I want to pass down a more complex element, okay? Let's say I want to pass down a heading and also some text with it as well, and maybe buttons and many other things. So you want to pass down a full JSX element, or maybe simplify and say HTML elements, okay? So what you can do is that you can have, as you have an opening, for example, div and closing div, and opening H1, closing H1, you can have an opening and closing of your component itself, which my example is the header, okay? So I have an opening and closing tag, and in between them, I can add whatever I want, okay? I can say word, okay? Now, how my comments will read this, okay? Now, with what we are passing, this will not read out, okay? And it's only displayed currently my heading, okay? So what we can do, there is a special keyword or special property you can use called children. Okay, no, as an object as well. So children, and what you can do is that you can pass the children right there. And again, this is a reserved keyword. You can see we didn't pass any property here, okay? But children in any component refers to any elements or any things you add between the opening and closing tag of your component itself, okay? If we save this and go back to my browser, you can see, I can see the hello word, okay? Let me even add some more exclamation marks so it's make some difference for you. Go back and there we go, okay? So this is a really, really powerful one. It can help you to add as many complex GSX elements you want. I can do, for example, like this too, okay? Render for me a H1 with hello word, and render for me also some p tag with description. This is my short description, and also I can render anything like a button, okay? Click me. So anything you want basically, okay? If I save this and I go back to my browser, you can see everything is passing right there. And my components are reusable. My main feature now is just the background image, but you can see that you can do a lot of things with this children property, okay? Just make sure this is reserved keyword, so you can't go here and do something else with it. You can't go and do children equals something, okay? And then you do some different things with it. Children is a reserved prop keyword in React, okay? And that's what all it means. It just means whatever content you add between your opening and closing tags of your components, okay? Now let me end all this, and let me actually show you something else as well. As before, we said this is instruction. You can also just do props as well, or you can call again anything you want. But whatever you call here, which is props now, you can access again the children with props.children. Okay, and you can save, and you can see my component is rendering. Again, my favorite way is always do the structuring. It just helped me when I look at the component to know what properties it is expecting. So I just stick to it usually, and I keep always my components properties is structured. Okay. Now let's put back what we had before, because I don't need that, and just put back this as well. Heading. Okay, save. Okay, now let's go to the next part where we have to render a list of to-dos. So basically this list we already should have it, which will be an array of some elements, okay? So we'll see how we can map through that array and render this list here, okay? Which means we're still in the static side, okay? Now let's go back to my project. I'll create a new component which call to-dos, because it's this list of to-dos, okay? And I'll create my index file there. And because I'm using Visual Studio Code, I have a shortcut to generate for me the arrow function for my component. But again, it's the same thing. You're just declaring your function or your component. Give it a name, which should be always a capital, starting first letter, and then it returns some JSX or an HTML content for you. Okay, so at the moment, I need just to add a mock for my list of to-dos, an array. So I'll just copy it from somewhere. I'll just mark it here. So data, and I'll call it an array, and this is a list, okay? So basically it's just a list of some to-dos, and that to-dos have an ID, a title, and also completed, if it's completed or not, okay? Now, what we want to do is we want to render a row or a lane which give me the title and also the status of completion too. And maybe to start with, let's just display for title for now, then we'll enhance it later. So what we have to do is we can go inside our return function, okay? And then let's say also I want to add some subtitle, of course, for example, okay? I just want to show you how you can have multiple elements in your return function, okay? So I'll say it's h4, my current to-dos. And then now what we have to do is we need to map through our array, okay, of data, or let's call it data, okay? So we have to map through this array, and what we want to do is that whenever we are on element, I want to display this title in my UI, okay? So the way we can do that is very simple and easy. First, you just start with your curly bracket to access your variables in your React, okay? I'll say datas. Then I'll use something called map, which is a function, and it's not specific to React. It is a JavaScript function, okay? Which help you map through your array of elements and access each and every element in it, which currently we have objects, okay? So map, and I'll say to do, oops, and I'll say to do, okay? And this to do you can call it anything you want. But for me at the moment, each time I'm mapping to this data, this to do will be one of these elements right there. Every time it's taking a loop, okay? So of course we loop them through order. So first it will be this to do, then this to do, okay? So what I will say whenever I map, every to do I want to access the title and display it from in my UI. Okay, so let's go back to our map. So it will accept an arrow function, taking to do as argument, which is one element in my array. And then I want h5 for now at the moment, and inside to be curly brackets so I can access my variable to do. Okay, so to do dot title. Let's click save, and let's go back to our UI. And it's not working. I still can only see my h1, which is my banner. And the reason why is, as you may have maybe understand it by now, is that we create our component, we make it available to our application, but we didn't import it anywhere. So I know at the moment my parent component is the page.js. That's where I render my header. In the same level, I want to render my to-do list. So I'll say to-dos. Okay, that's my folder, my components I named. Okay. So I close that, and I also have to import it, of course. So I'll just copy this and paste it right there. Save, go back to my UI, and there we go. Okay, so we have my subtitle I added, my current to-dos, and then I have my list of to-dos. If you remember, I had 4 elements in my array, so I have 4 titles rendering right there. Okay, now one more thing is that before we move forward is remember when we said that we need to have only one parent element? So always your components will only have one parent, okay? You can't have siblings rendering together. So as I do that, my file is complaining as full red, okay? Because you can't do it. And you can see JSX expression must have one parent element only, okay? So we can't do that. So for this rule, because of this rule only, sometimes we have to add extra elements only to wrap up everything else, okay? Which means if you go to your UI, I'll just go tap your components, okay? So imagine, of course, in real-time applications, you have a huge applications and so many components you're building, and you'll be taking them everywhere and reusing them everywhere. So many times you'll end up with so many nested levels, which are for no reason, only because React allow us only one parent child for a component. So the way you can do it, you can fix this, and React give us a very powerful things which call fragments. So if I do React, let me just write this one, React dot fragment, and I'll come here as well and do it. That will be my closing. So this one, what it does basically, it is an element, but it's not a real HTML element. And all what it does, it just wrap, but in the actual source file, there will be nothing there. Okay, so if we save and go back to our source file, you can see here now, we have our H1 the banner, immediately the other children's in my component, which is H4, then H5s. So you don't have any other parent level there. Okay, now for clarity of your code, for readability, again, you have now extra a lot of text in your component, which if your component is big, of course, means harder to read. React also have a shortcut for this, so you can just remove the React fragment, okay? And you keep it empty. Amazing, right? In normal HTML, you can't do this, okay? This is just related to React. So you can do something like this. If you need a wrapper which doesn't have any styling, is not used for anything, it's just there because you need one parent uh, element in your component, then you can do like this, okay? So it's wrapping your elements, but again, I save it, I go back to my UI, I don't have any extra um, level here just in the sake of wrapping my components, okay? Which means, again, no more nested elements for no reasons and better performance for your bigger applications. Before we move a little bit forward, I just did a little bit basic styling. So our app is a little bit appealing to our eyes while we are studying. So I just took from this video the first approach to do that one very quick. So I add some styles in my global.css file. So I just add some basic styling right here. Okay. And then what I have done in my to-dos, I just add some those classes right there. Okay. So we use class name to add those classes, and then our styling is working perfectly. Now, one more thing is, let's see how we can do some conditional styling in this step. So as you remember, our data have a completed property, which either is false or it is true in my last one here. So what I want to do is that when my item is completed, I want to have a background of green and also just do a cross on top of it, okay? So what I have done, I added a class here called completed, which have a text decoration line through, okay? And also I have a background color for completed class as green, okay? Now, how we can add this conditional class name in our class here, okay? So what you can do, you can here, we don't have the brackets, but we have these special ones. And what we can do is we can have our normal class, which is to do item, right? And then we will have a condition here. If my completed attribute is true, add the class completed. Otherwise, don't add the class completed. So what you can do, you can do $sign, then curly bracket, then say if my to do, so my current item dot completed, if it is true, okay, then add a class of completed. Otherwise, just an empty string, which means nothing. Okay, so this is how you can add a conditional styling for your component. Let's save this. Let's go back to our browser and then you can see. Okay, when I hover, because we have a hover style, it's gone. But as I don't hover, you can see my title is straight. There's a strike through it, and it have a background color of green. Now, let's talk about when you're doing mappings in React. So when you're doing mappings, you need to have the parent components assigned a property which is called key. Okay, and this is like an ID, an unique identifier for your components. Okay, and usually you have to give it something which is very unique. Currently, our items have IDs which are unique for each item, so I will use that for now. But let's say, for example, if you don't have a unique thing assigned to your component, you can use, for example, the index of the item in your array, okay? But this one is not recommended, it's not safe. Mostly if your array change the position of its items through the life of your application, okay? So you can use index like this as well. Okay, but again, this is not really recommended way of doing it. But if you don't have any options and that's the only way to go with it, again, it is fine as well. Now, why we use this key? So the reason why we use this key is that when you have, for example, in our example here, we have a list of to-dos, right? Our React go through this array and map through them. And let's say I go and add a new item. Let's say I have an input field and add a new item to my array. Okay? So what you're expecting from your React, you expect that it will go and add that new item to your UI, okay? But don't go and render again whatever it has been there before. And without this key, React will not know what has been there before or not, okay? So basically, this key help your React application to know what things are new and what things need to be updated and what things they don't need to. Okay, so that's why it's like a unique identifier and it has to be unique in your application. And imagine you have, I don't know, a page with thousands of items and you're adding something to them. Of course, you don't want your React component to go and re-render behind the scene all those 1,000 things only because you add an item to it. Okay, it will have a very bad impact on your application performance. And also when you have other usage as well, like scrolling events and all that stuff, it will get lost, okay, if your component re-renders behind the scene. So strict rule, whenever you have a mapping in your React application, whatever parent component, the first element, which is wrapping whatever else inside, that one should have a key and should have a unique property, as a unique value assigned to it as well. Okay, now let's see something else about React. Basically, it is easy to use because it is a UI or component-based application, which means is that every piece of your UI, you have to write it its own component, okay? Which make it easy to use, easy to read, and also easy to debug and test as well, okay? So what that means for us? At the moment, we have a very simple component, which is just a to-do list, okay, or to-dos, which render for us a list of to-do. And all what we're rendering at the moment is a title only, okay? But let's say in the future of this video, we'll be having also like a checkbox, so you can switch between completed and not completed. So you'll need a new HTML element or new JSX there for you, and so on. So it can be very complex, this only a list or one item in your to-do. So the best thing to do is to create a new component that's only rendered that one single item of your to-do. Okay, so let's do that together. And we'll go to our component folder and I'll create a new folder called to-do item, okay, which means one item in my to-do. Then create my index file. And I'll use a shortcut I have in my Visual Studio Code that will generate for me arrow function quickly, and I'll call it index. Okay, so again, same thing. You are just declaring a component, which is again just a function, and returning a JSX for you. Okay, then we're exporting default that component. Now, what I will do, I will just copy at the moment whatever I have here, and I'll just paste it right there. Okay, now few things you see here is that we have a dynamic data rendering. We're using something to do from our map. Okay, so how our component will know how to read those details, right? So if you remember from the props section, so you use the props for this. So I'll have a property here called to do. Again, this one, call it anything you want, but whatever you call here should be the one you're using when you import your component. So I'll come here, I'll say to do item, and again we'll just use the same property we called here, which is to do, and it will be equal to my to do, which is here in my mapping. Close. Okay, now we have this one here, and the key we should not be using now anymore here because it's a single component, but should be directly used in your mapping. So we'll have a key added right there. Okay, so key to do.id. Okay, now let's save this and see if this is working. Let's go back, and you see it's erroring out. Okay, and the reason why is because my component, so I have to go and import it from my to-do item. Okay, just simple like that. Now let's go back to our UI. Okay, so all what we have done is just we created a different component that will hold for me one single row only, okay? So we have a component for the whole list, then we are mapping, then we have a component that take care for each item separately, okay? Which will be very handy for us later when we're working also in states. Now, that is done. There are different ways you can pass this prop. So now we pass like a one single prop, okay? And then we access it there. Then we say, okay, to do dot completed and to do dot title. When you have more things, you have to again to do dot whatever other attributes you have. There are other approaches as well you can do to pass the properties. Let's see a few of them. Like for example, I can destruct this property right here. I will say completed, and we have title. Okay, then you can come here and remove to do dot, which means your code will be less complex and more readable. I click save and go back to my UI and see it's still working, okay, which is perfect. Now, this another approach is that you can, for example, pass that directly the completed and title without having an extra layer of your object, okay? So you can pass it just like this, and you can come back here, and instead of having to do, you'll have now completed and title, okay? So we can do like this. So completed equal to do dot completed, okay? And this completed property here, it's same the name we are using right there. Again, the title, same. We can do same thing. We can do title equal to do dot title, okay? And this one also will still work perfectly as well, okay? Now, this one can be a bad practice if you have, for example, a big list of properties you're passing down, so your components will be difficult to read and maintain as well. So there's a shortcut for this, which you can do simply just by destructuring your actual object, okay? Which is just three dots and then to do. So basically you're destructuring whatever items. What when I'm doing like this, now I'm passing extra things. I'm passing also the user ID, and also I'm passing the ID down to my child component, even though I don't need them. So it's still working, but I'm passing extra properties that I don't need at all in my component, okay? So if you go back to my UI, this is also working. Now, the downside the downside of this approach is that you'll be passing down so many properties, and maybe you have bigger components which have a lot of other properties and functions and complex things. You'll be also destructuring them, then passing them down. And maybe now it looks like nothing, but trust me, in real-time applications, that can be a nightmare and can impact your performance of your application. So for me, the best thing I try to stick to for now is always passing the whole object instead of trying to destructure it and then pass it down. So I'll keep it for now in this way. The same thing, I have to refix my to-do item and just redo to-do property and also access it right here. Click save. Let's go back to our UI. And let's go back to our UI and this. Now let's look at the next term or next thing in our React learning, which calls state. And what is state? Basically, state is like something like a magical box where you can store some data and change it as well whenever you want to. So up to now, we're able to have something called props, which help us to pass data down from a parent to child component, but we said you can't change it, okay? So for example, now we have this list of to-dos and we have the completion, okay, and we can't change it at the moment. So what I have done is just added a checkbox so it can help us to do it, but now you can see it's not working, okay? So to make it work, we have to make a use of something called state, right? And likely for us in React, in the new version of React, you have a built-in hooks. Well, hooks basically that just function again. So there's a built-in hook called useState, which help you to make a state, store it, and manipulate it whenever you want to. So let's not do a lot of talking and let's jump directly into the code. Okay, so this is our row that we create or our item we created for to do. Okay, and we have now an input field for a checkbox. So what I want to do is whenever I click or I change my input checkbox, I want to be able to toggle the completion status, okay? So to do that, first we have to create our state where I will store my completion value and then change it. Like I said, you can't change the props, right? So we go here first, we import a hook called useState. Again, for a minute, if you need more details and more depth learning about use state, I have a full React hook playlist which talks about all React hooks, and one of them is use state. Okay, now we import the use state, and this use state again is a hook, is a function, but there are few rules you need to stick with them when it comes to the hooks. The first rule is that you can call them only inside your function component. I can't call it outside here, okay? I only can call it inside, okay? So use state. And this use state accepts an argument which is a default value of whatever state you're creating. So I'm creating this box. I want You can keep it empty initially, or you can add something default inside. For now, I want this state. I know it will be manipulating the completion for me. So I want to store the one coming from properties from my to-do item as default one. So I'll say to-do dot is dot completed. Okay, so that will be default value of my state. Now this function, this hook, give us back an array. Okay, so this array have two objects or two values thing. So the first one is to your actual state, whatever state you have, and you can call it anything you want. I will call it is completed. The second one, it will be a function that will help you to change your state. It will help to change its values inside this magical box you're creating, okay? And always it starts with set and follow it with anything you want. But for me, I always follow a pattern, set, then the name of my actual state. And why I do that is that when I have a bigger applications, you can have many states in one component. And then it will be easy for me to know when I see a setter function called somewhere, I know it is which state it is handling. Okay, so I keep these naming conventions following the same rules. Okay, now I created my state, which taking default value is complete from to do. Now, what I will do, all my elements here will not be using anymore the completed from the props, it will be using the one from the state. So I'll go remove them, and there we go, okay? If we see our UI, it should still working as it was before, okay? Nothing is changing, but whatever completed is crossed and checked, and whatever not completed is still not checked and not crossed, okay? Now let's make this work. So how it will do is that I want whenever I check my checkbox, then I want to toggle the completion status. So of course I need an event here. It's called on change. And you can see this on change is camel case. It's not like normal HTML, which is all lowercase, but in JSX it is camel case. Then I can create my function and to be an arrow function. And all it will do for me is just call this setter function because I want to change my state. And I know whatever I will be changing is just applying the opposite of my current state. So all what I have to easily is just this. Okay, whatever opposite value for my current state. Let's click save and let's go back. Let's go back to our application. It's working. Okay, very easy, very simple. Now, there are different ways of doing things. Like, for example, I hate and I don't like this way of having inline function. Usually, I'll create a different function. Okay, I'll say, for example, toggle. It will be an arrow function. And then whatever I'm doing here, I'll just do it right there. And then I will call this function here. Again, everyone have different preferences, but for me, this will make it more readable. And also, when you start looking at performance side and you have different events handlers working on your components, it may cause some performance issues, which I can't go in depth in this video. Maybe in my coming uh, series, we should talk more about React. But this is the best practice you can do, okay? If you can avoid declaring inline functions, just avoid them. Like it's better to not use inline styling, okay? Now let's double check that this is still working. I will check and it's working, okay? Okay, before we move a little bit forward in this course, you need to learn a basic tool, which is a mandatory actually one. Any React developer should be knowing how to use this tool and be using it while developing. And this tool called React Dev Tool. So React Dev Tool. And that is an extension from the web Chrome, okay? So you can go ahead and add this extension. For me, it's already installed. So please feel free to add it to your Chrome browser. When you do so, you might have to close your Chrome and then run it again so it can pick it up for you. So when that's done, you can, for example, close this. I'll do from beginning. So you can just click if F12 or right click and go to inspect. So as you have your Amazon consoles, you have now two new tabs. The first one is component tab, and that will help you to debug your React component. As you have inspect of your HTML, this is kind of inspector for your React component. For example, let's say I want to inspect this component. Okay, see the name, what is it? So it's index. And the reason why is because our component here, I'm calling them index. So maybe that's a good thing if you can call them meaningful names. So it can help with debugging. So you call them index. I'm expecting this index to have a property called to do and also to have one state, which is a hook within that. So I can easily debug that in my browser. So when I find my component, I go to the props and I can see it have a prop here to do, and I can see the values in that property for me. Same thing for the hooks. You have a hooks section, and it lists for you all the hooks used within your that component. And at the moment, I only have one. The bad thing for it until now is that it doesn't pick up the name of your state. It just tells you what type of hook it is, okay, and the value of it. So for now, the first one it is true, so it is showing this one as true because we changed here, we selected, okay? So it's not same as the property at the moment. So whatever current state it is, it pick it up for you. Now let's say I want to see the parent of these children here. I can go one level up, and that is my to-do component, if you remember, and which is this one, okay, the to-dos. And those to-dos also have one state but have no property, okay? So if I go back to my browser, that to-do, so props, there's nothing. And hooks, there's only one hook, and that is a state which accepts an array of objects, okay? And I can see all the values within my state as well. So one thing can be very handy when you have big applications and very complex interactions, and sometimes you have bugs and issues. So it helps you to find the values passing down, for example, between parents and children and so on. Okay. Now the other thing is the profiler, and profiler, as it sounds, it helps with profiling your application, means knowing the performance of your application, how much time it takes for component to render, how many times it rendered behind the scene, why it rendered, and so on. Okay, so one thing I do when I add this extension every time to any browser I have is that I do a few things in the settings. So you can click this setting icon here, and I do highlight updates when component render. I do tick it. Okay, and also I make sure I have all these ones ticked as well. And in the profiler, make sure you record why each comment render as well. This one is ticked too. Okay, so every comment renders, just make sure you are profiling as well. Okay, now let me show you how this profiler works. Let's say, for example, I want to see my components, which ones render behind the scene when my application render first time, and also how many times they render. To do that, I can click this icon here, which reload and start profiling at the same time. So let's click this and I stop profiling. And you can see here, tell me it rendered 3 times. I'm more interested at this one because the one on the top, there are all the templates and the error handling built in Next.js, which I don't need them. So this is my to-dos component and interested at, and this is my children components, okay? So if I click that one, then I go through the comments. I can see it didn't render behind the scene in the second comment. It just a side effect of Next.js. And the third one also, it didn't re-render behind the scene. It just side effects again of the hard reloading. So I'm happy with this. That's why my comment only rendered first time. That's it, which is expected at the moment. And also if you hover, you can see the duration and also the reason why it rendered. And if you click it, you can see the details on the right side for you. Same thing for children. If I hover, it tells me again the duration and also why it rendered. And if I click it, I can see the details as well on the right side. So this debugging and profiling is a huge topic. I'll be making a full tutorial about it. I'll just go into a few steps in this course so it helps you to get started. But the deep details on how to use them, they are a full topic alone. So we'll not be going in depth in this course, okay? Now, I will close all this and let's profile one more thing. Okay, I want to know when I click this tick, I want to make sure that only this component is rendered behind the scene. I don't want anything else to render. So let's see if that's happening. So I click the record icon and click this checkbox, okay, and stop profiling. And I can see only one commit has happened, which is great. This is my to-dos component. It didn't render. It's great. And the other children component also didn't render, which is great. Only the one I changed, it rendered. And if I hover on it, it tells me also the duration, and also it says why this why did this render hook one changed. Okay, so if I click that, you can see the details here, which makes sense because in our app, when you do the checkbox, you are changing your state, which is a hook in React, okay? And it is the hook number one. And that's one rule why we have, this rule about hooks in React that you have to use them in order, and you can't have them within a conditional statement because the React look at them in order all the time whenever you component re-enter behind the scene, and that order have to be always the same, okay? If I have not a state in my component, it should be always, if it's second, should be always in any render second running all the time. Okay, so that's how it pick up the numbers of the hooks for you. It's picking them up by order they are in your code. Okay, so that's how you can use this profiler. So that's that. If I click this checkbox, you'll see a highlight around it. And that's telling you basically that component re-rendered, okay? For example, let's say if I click this and you see a highlight around that and you're not expecting it, that's mean a red flag for you, okay? That's mean you have to look at it. So that's why those settings I show you here, which is in general, that's the one showing you that line around the component should re-render behind the scene. Great.